This is on Route 22 out of Lapine, and it's about 5 plus about 18, so 23 miles roughly from Lapine. Okay, I'm now at, as I said earlier, at South Ice Cave. This is the actual entrance into the cave area. I'm suspecting that that's a cave there, and that there's a cave to my right below here. But that what this probably was part of a flow of the Pahoho, the shield volcano type of lava, that as it flowed, the outer parts cooled first, leaving caves formed by the lava that continued to flow probably downhill, and leaving those caves. So we'll go down into here and see this. And you can see the remnants even here of what looks like a layer of flow. And a little mini cave there, if you will. Now, as an ice cave, presumably there's ice in here. That usually comes from my limited experience from two sources. One, either from snow and water that drains into it, or, and right now, even though I'm in the sun, I can feel a cool air. Right in here, just feel a cold air coming here. And this is what makes me think that I know what causes this ice. It's, I think, the Bernoulli principle, and that is that when this ice cave is formed, it ends up with two open ends, or at least one end where air flows out of, another end where air can come into. And because of I think it's called the Bernoulli principle, but it's one in which, as air flows, kind of like, I think it has something to do with the wing foil dynamic of air, where it's forced to go a little bit faster, and it cools up, and then it precipitates out the air, or the water that was in the air as water vapor. And it builds up caves filled with ice, sometimes packed with ice, like the Shoshone Cave in Idaho. We'll go down here further and see if we can see ice. I'm going to try to go walk down through here and over to that lip of ice, or of rock rather, and then shine my flashlight in and see if I can see something. I don't know if there's enough light from my flashlight to see anything. I think the batteries are bad. But anyway, I don't see any ice here. And there's a drop-off, substantial drop-off right here. Looks like water there, and water there, and there. But I can't be sure. Okay, here's the first cave that I had shown from up on top. And so we'll go down inside of this. It looked like a bird just flew in here. So maybe there's a nest. It seemed like he went up onto the ceiling. There he is. Okay, this is just a straight cave. I don't feel air moving. There's the bird, and it looks like, what is that kind of bird? Can't remember the name. What's unnerving to me is the precariousness of these rocks, even though they're covered with moss, which indicates they've been here for quite a while. They still look, like many of them, like they could drop off in mass easily, and will someday. There's apparently something that they pick off of the walls. That mound in between the two caves is probably just that kind of cave ceiling overburden, if you will, that has fallen in, gotten filled up with dirt. I'm guessing that probably the lava flowed up out of the ground there, over a hump here, and down for some reason. This might have been just a hill or a lava hill, and left the cave here. But you can see what would happen if that overburden of rock there fell in on that cave, which it'll eventually do. It will be up to at least the height of the top of that mounding there. I'm at the Deschutes Pringle Falls Campground on the Deschutes River, which at this point is not much of a river. But on the other hand, by looking across the river, you get an idea of how it can be when water apparently can go up as high as certainly that dark area, but maybe even higher. And it's kind of slow right now, but you can see right where I am that it's fairly down, because this would be the more normal height, although this is not an unreasonable height for it to be at where I'm at right now. But anyway, I'm going to take a walk down here. There really is apparently no falls here. What it really is a series of little rapid shelves, if you will. Rapids or shelves. You can see some of the rapids as you go across the bridge on that main road coming here, which is Burgess Road. But it's a pretty little spot. There are a whole bunch of residential houses alongside the river for quite some distance. They're apparently in their 6th year of drought, same as Jackson, so not much of a surprise that there isn't a lot of water here. When I was talking to him, he recognized me. We were passing vehicles, and he recognized me because he takes care of all of these campgrounds, apparently, federal campgrounds. And he had noticed me up at the lake I was at last night and a couple nights the night before. And he had suggested another place I might go that's up in that area that has a little falls that I didn't see. It's off the McKay Campground. So this would be a fun thing to kayak down if it had about another 2 feet of water in it, 2 or 3 feet of water. The trees in this part of Oregon are magnificent, and they're still lumbering them down. You'd think at some point in time they would run out. Some areas you see evidence of replanting. In other areas you don't see any evidence. Pretty campground, nobody in it. Typifies a weekday and this time of year. And probably the water status of this river right now. Not deep enough to do much fishing, I wouldn't think. So I'm going to spend the night. This is the 17th of October. I'm going to spend the night here. Campground just happened to no longer have fees as of last night, as of this morning actually. This is McKay Campground, and I think the falls may be called the McKay Falls, but this is the McKay Crossing, which, as you can see, no longer is. Where it went, I don't know. Might be a nice mountain bike ride tomorrow, though. This This is the falls, just a short walk away from the campground. Not as big as the other one, but actually I think prettier in many ways. I think the wall, if the water comes down, is prettier, and it breaks up the flow of water into those 4 different chunks. And then it drains down into what is an obvious pool. It almost looks like the wall there to create the pool is man-made, but whatever. Pretty sure it is. Makes for a lovely place to go for a swim if you're inclined, which I'm not. Downstream, just a little bit from the falls, there's supposed to be a trail here that I can hike. It's named after some man, but I haven't seen any evidence of that yet. I'll look around further. But he indicated, the fellow that I talked to, that there were a series of small falls all the way down the trail. A little bit of a look upstream. I can't figure out how to get down at the water level. Maybe this is all that was intended. And some little rapids and tiny falls. What's pretty is the sound of that water. And a little bit further downstream. Downstream a little bit looks like somebody's camp set up maybe for hunting or something. Looks like they're covered things up in anticipation of their return. Pretty spot for a campsite. Little pool here. And the beautiful noise of water falling. Now I'm on the other side of the creek, working my way back up to the crossing. Probably one of the little falls I photographed from up above. Don't know. They're just pretty. Somehow reminds me of the East Coast. Don't quite know why. I think this is either a wren or it's one of those American dippers. Now curiously, on this other side of the bridge, which you can't reach from where my van is by vehicle, because the bridge is obviously blocked, there's an entire campground over here. And there's a sign that says no trailer turnaround, which I assume refers to that road there, which suggests that there's not another way out of this spot right here. So it's curious. It all looks kind of relatively new. Perhaps they just blocked it off recently. Welcome to the Lava Cost Forest Geological Area. This 1 mile paved trail will take you through some fine examples of unique geological formations known as lava casts. These are beautiful trees. It's no wonder the logging industry gets emotionally excited about them. There's a certain sadness in the downed giants, although it's all part of the cycle of life. A poignant reminder that fire is also. Notice the woodpecker hole right halfway up. You can see that these rocks are very much like pumice. Very much pumice. They're relatively lightweight. I can pick this big rock up fairly easily because much of it is air. And over here is a tree hole, or a tree cast. And it looks as though it would have been covered by a subsequent relatively thin flow. You don't see the bark in here like I did at Crater of the Moons and that ones that were lying down. This is probably another hole that's deteriorated and fallen in. And another hole here, you can see how the lava has piled up, probably flowing from that direction this way, I'm guessing, but has piled up on the weather or windward side of the flow or of the tree. Doesn't look like it was too large a tree. Here we can see some of what was the surface of the flow 6,000 years ago, presumably. That portion not broken up like most of this, which looks like, I think it's called regolith. Here's another, looks like evidence of a smaller tree. I don't have a brochure because this is basically closed for its normal season, although the facility is of course left open. It's funny to walk on. It seems unstable, and it is, but it doesn't move much. It's just cinders. Here's another hole here. That looks like it would have been a fairly large one. You can see the curvature at that end. Maybe 3.5 feet across. Here is one of the nicest ones I've seen so far. It's complete as to its cast, and it's fairly deep. I'd guess 6 to 8 feet deep. Almost looks like you can see some pattern there that might have been the bark, but I don't think so. But it gives you an idea of how deep this flow was, at least. Now here another fairly large one. This one an elongated kind of a design of the tree. I mean, the cross section is oval, and again just about that deep. This looks like it's part of the tree system, but I can't be sure. There's a kind of a faint little break, it looks like, along here that could have been a fallen tree, except that this height of this lava flow was about 6 to 8 feet, it looked like early on. So my guess is that this may just be a crack in the lava, but I don't know. This is another cast, and it's the first one I've seen. It's really rather interesting in the sense that the walls are pretty evident there. About 5 inches thick, where the rock literally cooled around there, and I think cooled fairly slowly, causing it to not crystallize but not be frothy and like the pumice around it. And this also was pretty deep and fairly large. It's interesting that Native Americans didn't sense the desire, if in fact they didn't, to use these as burial spots. Here's another one, and you can see how the flow must have come from the left to the right, because the greater volume built up on the left side, or called the windward side of the flow on the tree. It's much thicker there. The wall looks like it's maybe 10 inches thick versus maybe 8 inches down at the bottom, although it's still fairly thick down on the right side also. This is a pretty obvious mound in the flow, as well as this concave area is fairly obvious, although it doesn't seem to be a tree or anything like that that was the basis for this. Maybe it was several trees, but it's not evident. It's just kind of curious. But we can see here too how this mound seems to be flowing onward, so maybe it was just a pile up and then it continued to flow along in this direction. Here's another of the many tree casts here, and right nearby is a relatively straight channel, but again, can't be sure that it's a tree lying down. And why would it be lying on this surface when the surface apparently at the time of the flow was 6 to 8 feet deeper? Look at the way this old tree has grown, almost like a snake uncoiling from the ground. I'm behind that last tree mold that we looked at, and you can just literally see how the flow piled up on called the windward side of the flow side of of the tree splitting apart at some later point in time right there, perhaps just from the cooling process. Maybe it even went a little bit higher, but you can almost trace and continue out the angle of curve on that piece to the left and see where it might have gone. Now, relative to the trail, which is right there, but relative to that, you can see where this is mounded up into a sizable hill, perhaps just representing different parts of the flow, like fingers on a hand. But what's particularly unique here, at least that I haven't seen so far, that kind of alludes to what we looked at earlier at the Newberry volcano, is this almost obsidian look, but it's only on the surface, where the surface looks as though someone had dropped some can of paint and it had simply solidified right here. You can see what I mean. Underneath it, though, it's a more textured rock, unlike obsidian, which would be glass all the way through. And here we can see a couple of levels of it, just separated by a few inches of stuff. And maybe it is just a surface, but I wonder what kind of rock that is and what caused that look. Now this looks like another tree cast, but if it is, you can tell just from the elevation here that it's more like 15 feet in height. Now there is a certain sense of curvature over there, but not much. It's just a guess. And you can see that generally the elevation of the flow is increasing, particularly upwards that way. I'm just kind of working my way up the hill off the path, and here I've encountered another tree mold, a fairly good sized tree. Again, it almost looks like you can make out the bark, but if it is, it's weathered. You wonder if someone were to dig down inside here, certainly scientists must have tried it, to see if the farther down they got, whether for the design of the bark may still be evident. And I wonder how high this is, considering that I'm climbing up all the time. It's interesting how in this barren environment, which looks like it's devoid of any kind of soil, life still gets a tenuous grasp on whatever there is. Look at this little plant right here. Now it's interesting, how much of its soil did it grab, and how much was required for it just to even get started? And yet there's another form of plant life over here. Down in that little cup, if you will. Maybe the moisture there somehow helps it. And of course here, the precursors of all of the most living things on earth, the lichens and mosses. We see on these rocks, this looks like a thin wash of something. But even here, how this pine tree has gained a grasp on this ground. And all around it looks just too barren for anything to get a grip. I climbed up here in the hopes that I could say I'd climbed to the top of the flow and perhaps see some different geology that indicated this was the spot where the lava came out, but I can see that's probably not true. Looking across, there's a hill there that is covered with lava. Looks like a lava flow, of course, and it's higher than I am here, so probably somewhere back up in there is where it really started, and I don't know where, and I'm not going to try and pursue it. So I'll hike back down and see if I can find the trail again. I don't know what this mountain is there. I'm sure I can look at the map and find out. This looks like it might have been a lava bomb. A lava bomb is a glob of lava that under pressure is thrown up into the air, cools in the air a bit. So when it hits the ground, it kind of keeps its round configuration. You can see that curving off to the left, and even the broken pieces on the right seem to indicate a rounded surface, although I could just be kidding myself. It's interesting, as I look out here on the ground, there's this wash of green lichen all across the rocks, but even then there is variety that's mutated. You can see this white that also is some kind of lichen, and it appears that there's a black something or other here too that may also be a lichen. It looks like it's part of the rock, but on the other hand it seems to appear similarly and in association with the other two lichens, the green and the white. Now here we're in a little catch basin. Looks like it's a water runoff. We're starting to get flattened out in spots here. Just a little catch basin, maybe 3-4 square feet. Same there, but you can see now the mosses. It's the second building block of life. And even there, as we look at it closely, it seems like there are some variations, the star-shaped ones versus those that just look like a smooth surface, almost like the lichen. Some places they look the same. Here a pine tree, all twisted, gone through its entire cycle of life, splitting open that pile of rock that it started to grow in, or that it's got its grip in, but now it's being taken over by, I think that's a kind of a moss. And so the breakdown of the tree will continue, and the expansion of life forms will also continue. There's a bench up there that I'm working my way towards in the hopes that the trail is there, because down through here I can see no trail. It's very treacherous walking because everything is loose and unstable, but it doesn't move much because it's so rough that it grabs onto its neighbors. But you have to pick your way through very carefully. This is pretty easy going here because the pieces are relatively flat. It gets a little more rugged right over here. I have to figure out how to get through this mess. And here it gets treacherous. Just have to move slowly, carefully, checking rocks like that one, see how loose and what direction it seems to be wanting to move. So my guess is the flow came from somewhere over to the left and back in behind there somewhere. It's a nice trail that they've created. Oregon and the federal government here in Oregon done a superb job on almost everything that I've encountered. And these trees, their size may give some hint as to what kind of, or what it looked like before the lava flow 6,000 years ago. I don't know if the trees were the same species or if even the same size, but we have certainly seen some that are about this size, like that one right there. Maybe the smaller ones were just so small that they were literally burned at that moment by the lava. Here's an interesting horizontal or lengthwise view, I should say, of a lava tube. You can see how it's already breaking through just from use, from erosion, maybe even vandalism. And probably the tube continues here. And probably a lot of what I walked across and a lot of those long snaking depressions were probably lava tubes. Well, here's a great view of the end piece. Oh yeah, that's great. It's one of the nicest I've ever seen of this size. Great illustration of a lava tube. Probably is the best one I've ever seen. And no surprise, there are several more right alongside of it, since all would have been flowing and all coming at the same, roughly the same temperature. I'm at spot number 11, but I don't have a brochure to interpret, but this is looking down the flow as it apparently, on that flow at least, wove around this knoll that I'm on. If that was a separate flow from the rocks that are right next to me here and that compose this hill, you wonder if there were animals standing somewhere up here where I am, watching this flow. Maybe even getting trapped up here and unable to leave for several days or weeks because it was so hot. What's magnificent about these fall trips is that they've closed down many of the campgrounds and the interpretive centers, but left them open so you can go through them on your own or camp there for free. But what's really magnificent is the weather sometimes is just like the last 2 days, and a third day being today. Just gorgeous, gorgeous weather. I'm in shorts and short sleeve shirt, and nobody is here. I mean, like zip, nada, yet. It's just a wonderful time to be here. Have all this to yourself. Amazing. Now this looks like a lava tube assembly here, but noticing on the wall that almost MacArthur Park icing flowing down the cake smooth look that we saw earlier on a couple pieces of rock. And see in here also, that may be the boundary line between the flowing and the cooled outer part. May that simply be that ideal set of temperature condition and speed condition. Looks like another tree cast on the side of a hill. This is probably a lava tube, although I wish I could say that it were not. But here's the continuation of it. And there's more of that surface, like it was painted on by a contractor. But yet when we look further down, you don't see that same kind of texture, that smooth surface. What obviously catches your mind here is the similarity of these lava tubes to plumbing, man-made plumbing. What if someday we can develop devices that can literally burn their way through rock cores, sand or whatever the material is, and convert it into tubes going where we want, 6-inch walls, maybe such that it's so impervious to any kind of movement that it would last for longer than these would last. All along this part of the trail, I'm seeing more and more of these tree molds, but what's interesting with this one is how it's an ecological system for not only the lichen, obviously, but for more advanced plants growing almost like what do they call them? The dripping gardens, for example, you see at Zion. Forget what they call these. They grow on the sides of cliffs, usually where there's water precipitating or percolating out from the rock that they're attached to.